Next up, I will be interviewing venture capitalist and former Facebook executive Chamath Palihapitiya. Welcome.
Thank you.
You just got off a plane.
I flew back. I flew here with Gurley after the playoff game yesterday.
Yeah.
Go Warriors.
You own the Warriors. I mean, you're an owner of the Warriors, right?
Warrior, the Warriors. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, like, for a city that's like had the 49ers crushing it, the Giants crushing it, and then for us to have gone through a bunch of turbulent years with that team, it's unbelievable. That stadium is just electric. It's amazing.
I want to spend some time talking about Social Capital, the venture firm that you founded. But first, before that, I want to take some time to learn about you, because I think you've been called by many the unconventional VC. You've taken some unconventional paths in your career. What makes you unconventional?
I think it's hard to be that as a purposeful thing. I just have my own specific path. So the very short version is parents emigrated to escape a civil war, grew up in Canada, was technically educated, and then just kind of became a bit of a sellout for a little while, traded derivatives.
A sellout meaning?
Well, meaning like, I
was
just really poor, and they offered me a job, and it was a lot of money, and so I took it, and within a year I was like, like people in banking and finance are like smart enough to be greedy, but not really smart enough to be useful, and these people are just kind of stupid, and I was just like, this is just a bunch of paper chasing. And so I quit, and the best thing that ever happened to me was I applied for a bunch of different jobs, and I got a job at a company called Winamp, which made a media player in the late 90s, early 2000s, bought by AOL in early 2000. And that was like the keystone, because it's like I walked into a place which was 6 kids, literally, 22 years or younger. Nobody knew what they were doing, and they were just building really cool consumer software. I learned about platforms back in '99 and 2000 when nobody was talking about consumer platforms. And the most important thing was we built a bunch of distributed social software. And the most insidious / important thing that we did was we built this open source project called Gnutella, which became the sort of like the key ingredient in BearShare, LimeWire, Kazaa, all that stuff, and destroyed the music business. And so, when you're in your early 20s and you're like, holy mackerel, the key is you build for people. You kind of try to destroy these, hierarchically defined senses of power, and if you do it, you get rewarded. And so that's kind of been sort of that mantra, and every time I didn't listen to that intuition, I made a mistake. So in 2005, I was running AIM and ICQ at AOL. Sean Parker comes to me and says, Chamath, you have to join this company. And I waited a year, and that year literally cost me $1 gajillion. And the reason was because I got a job offer from Mayfield, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Traditionally defined venture capital firm, I can be a junior partner. And I spent a year basically dry humping failure until I was like, this is the dumbest thing in the world, I gotta go join Facebook. And so every time I kind of listened to that gut, it kind of worked out. And so the firm is basically with this premise that it's about deconstructing these extremely calcified senses of power. Like society as we define it right now is, I think, breaking at the seams. And all of us just live a life of total frustration. And it's because none of us trust the things that we were supposed to trust to help make the world a better, more useful, interesting place. And so the best thing that we should be doing is spending our money and our time to basically destroy that and to rebuild things in a much more equitably interesting way.
Yeah, so I'm curious, you've talked about innovation in Silicon Valley, and basically that there's not a lot of it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think we should be utterly ashamed right now. We are at like an absolute minimum in terms of the quality of things that are being started. And the reason is because, 40 years ago, there's a bunch of guys standing around some apple orchard with some sand in their hand, and they're like, hey, you know what, if we bake this at high temperature, we'll make this into silicon, we'll make transistors, we'll build computers. And then a couple, decades after that, someone says, hey, you know what, let's just put computers on every desktop. And then after that, people are like, hey, you know what, let's wire the world. Hey, let's light up everybody in the world. And now, the quality of it has just degraded to a point where it's just like people are running around rehashing ideas from 2003. And it's like people are coming to me like, I have this really great instant messaging app. You can take pictures and, it can be everything from an apple orchard to, your own genitalia. And oh, by the way, it's got this great feature where it goes away after 4 seconds. And I look at them and I'm like, okay, I did this business in 2003. It was a stupid business then. It's not a business now. And then somebody else comes and pitches me and says, well, you know what? I actually allow you to annotate and draw on top of those pictures. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. It's like people are dying left and right. People are frustrated with all of this inopportunity and inequity. And then now there's actually legislative change and all this other change, which is reallocating trillions of dollars, which to me says everyone should be focused on those big ideas.
So tell me about those ideas, because one of the ideas that you've centralized social capital around in terms of an investment thesis, though you say that there is no investment thesis, but you've done a lot of healthcare investments. And I'm curious, why healthcare, and also how do you know without healthcare experience in your past, how do you know what to invest in?
The reason why healthcare is interesting right now is because every single person in this room has a reason to care. Okay? It's kind of the same reason why at Facebook, when we defined the problem, all of a sudden we realized, wow, the product that we're building is applicable to everybody. There's nobody in this room, plus or minus, who doesn't want to live as long as possible. There's nobody in this room that doesn't want their kids, their wives, their sisters, their mothers, their brothers, their fathers to live as long as they can. And what's interesting is we lived up until Obamacare, at least in the United States, in a regulatory framework that was really structured in a way that prevented startups from being successful. And so as a result, you plow through hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and it's just littered with failure. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, Obamacare could be an interesting change. And so the first thing we did was we actually just read it. And what's crazy is like, this is what frustrates me sometimes, like there's so many shortcuts, so many Me Too copying. If you actually took the time to read that document or go to the Brookings Institute and talk to the folks that actually wrote the legislation, what you realize is there's like $5 trillion, trillion with a T, is going to rain from the skies over the next 10 years. And if you actually are prepared, you can take advantage of it. So what we did was we basically had a thesis. We did a bunch of work. We surveyed. We talked to every single company. And we waited for one key thing, which was the Supreme Court decision to either reverse it or to uphold Obamacare. And the minute that we saw that happened, we literally plowed almost $100 million into a bunch of different companies. Not all in one shot, but systematically.
Over how long was that?
Over like the last year, right?
And that's still a lot. It's a short amount of time to put a lot of money into a sector.
Now, in fairness, some of these companies, though, were started, it's not like everyone was started, right after Obamacare was upheld. Some of them have been around for years, some months, some weeks, some hadn't been around, and we incubated them. But the point was, we're like, there is real value there. Real value for people, real value for you as an entrepreneur to build a business, and more importantly, you can work on really cool stuff. So if you fail, you can say, I tried this big thing, and it's, to me at least, much more interesting to say you failed trying something crazy and huge than something incremental and just frankly, the fourth order derivative of something that was done 10 years ago.
So Mayo is one of your LPs.
Yeah.
And how did that happen? Did they approach you or you approach them?
So when I was at Facebook, I was investing a lot as an angel. And even before that, I learned to trade and invest very early, and I was always very good managing my own private account. And so at Facebook, when I got a little liquidity, I became an angel investor, and I got really lucky. I invested in a company in 2008 called Playdom. We sold it to Disney for $750 million. We got a ton of money, and so I said, oh, I'm just going to spend it all. I'm going to basically find as many cool startups and put every single one of these dollars to work. So I was investing it all and doing really well. And so I had met all these interesting people. And so I said to myself, okay, when I set up this fund, what I'm not concerned about is making money. So like last year, I think we participated in about $2 billion liquidity. This is a 2-year-old fund. So everything's fine. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I wanted to make money for people that I thought were interesting and good. I didn't want to make money for some other random person, some endowment, some pension fund, some university that isn't doing anything good with the money. What's the point of giving Harvard and Stanford another couple $100 million? So that they can buy another building? Yet there's people with trillions, $1 trillion of student debt, or to a foundation that isn't going to do anything interesting. So I basically found individuals where I felt comfortable that if I make money for them, they will do something that benefits all of us. And that's better for me because I myself am not a great person to allocate that into charity or other things. That's just not what I'm good at. So Mayo is basically this, I mean, look, heaven forbid you ever have to go there, but this is a quaternary care facility. What that means is when you go to a hospital and they don't know, they send you to a regional hospital. When they don't know, they send you to like the best sort of like teaching hospital. When they don't know, they send you to Mayo. It is the last stand. And these guys are a nonprofit that just saves people's lives. And so for me, it's just like an amazing thing where we made them a bunch of money. I was visiting them like a few weeks later, and they're like, you know what, that money pays for the refurbishment of this cancer wing. And I'm like, you know what, that's awesome. I hope I make them billions of dollars over the next few years.
I want to go back to the question about the domain expertise.
I have none.
Yeah. How are you finding these healthcare startups? What are some of the ones that you've invested in that you're
we did not
excited
stick
about?
out a shingle that said we invest in healthcare. We try to tell folks, and mostly it's just our network, find me the craziest thing you can. Find me the entrepreneur that's the most frustrated right now with an inability to raise capital because they're not saying what other people want to hear. Send that person to our doors. And that's what we did. And what happens is when you do the first few key interesting investments along that premise, those people tell their friends, who also tend to be these crazy, eccentric, kind of blighted people because they don't represent the canonical sense of what is a great venture investment anymore in Silicon Valley, and it kind of just perpetuates. And to be honest with you, I think it's better that we don't know anything about these spaces. We learn with them, which means that we're more inclined to take the kind of disproportionate risk that traditional folks won't take. So a simple example, a guy that I work with, one of the 3 engineering directors at Facebook, says to me, Chamath, I have these 3 extremely frustrated guys that I went to school with at Caltech. They can't raise money from anybody. I mean, anybody. They walked up and down Sand Hill. And when I met them, I've talked about this company before. They're trying to build a mass spectrometer using a CMOS sensor. Okay, awesome. It's technology. This is hard, right? This is about bending the laws of physics in our favor. It helps everybody. And for me to be able to give them $3 or $5 million to get them going, and now I've given them another $10 million, that's the kind of stuff that matters. And those guys know other really great, crazy, smart people. And so it kind of just builds on top of itself.
I want to talk about for.us. You teamed up with Mark Zuckerberg and many others to found this political advocacy group designed to promote policies that keep the American workforce competitive. What's the backstory behind that? How did you guys start that?
So I have a personal backstory, which is I've been now part of 2 immigration systems. I was a refugee in Canada, and then I was a more traditional knowledge worker immigrant in the United States. And it's really stressful trying to come here to do good things, to build things, and to create value for America right now. I basically was I had an H-1B that I had to renew like umpteen times. I was literally in my last year before I would have had to leave Canada when I finally got my green card, or leave the US to go back to Canada. And what's crazy is I think I've done pretty good, I paid my taxes, a ton of taxes, I've created a ton of jobs. I'm spending basically every penny I've made into investing in the future. And it's hard for me. So you can imagine for other folks how much harder it must be. And the problem is right now the United States is getting its ass kicked. We all talk about, and no offense to TechCrunch, but it's like, we spend all this time anointing these stupid, crappy companies as like the next Apple, the next this, the next that. Listen, the next Apple exists, actually. It's called Chamath. It's in China, okay? The next great e-commerce business has already been created. It's called Alibaba. It's also in China. Last mile delivery, you want to figure out that problem, go to India. It's called Flipkart, already solved. So I'm just looking around saying, what are we doing? We're basically focusing on these 1% problems while everybody else is focusing on these big higher order bit problems. And now this really, really smart people. Jack Ma is never going to come to the United States. The next Jack Ma now has even more incentive to never even consider coming to the United States. That's bad for us. And so for.us is a very simple framework to say we have to make sure that we continue to attract the best. Once you do that, then you can combine that with actually a process to educate kids and create incentives where like you want to be technical and you celebrate trying to start things and be an entrepreneur. And that's something right now that's unfortunately under pressure. And if we don't solve it, you're just going to become like every other country that was awesome and now is looking in the ahead saying, wow, look how those guys passed us. And it's happening.
Do you think that, I mean, you have to think that you guys are going to make some change. But it's hard in DC. I mean, it's a totally different world. It's not Silicon Valley. How do you actually make that change happen? I mean, it's, the group is probably the easiest part of that.
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, it's great. I literally have no idea. I mean, I think the folks that are actually the people that operationally run that day to day are very sophisticated and understand the nuances of how to affect it. And so, the big thing right now is this immigration bill, right, which is both a combined plan for knowledge workers, which, I think is really important, obviously, for Silicon Valley, but also a path for 11 million undocumenteds to be a structured part of the U.S. economy. And so, it's about kind of like trying to cross this like bipartisan divide. I get these emails every week that kind of summarizes their progress. They're doing a good job. It's a really gnarly, gnarly thing having to deal with Washington. And to be honest with you, my perspective was, it's a really good investment because it's a great way to pay it forward. And I'm really glad that other people other than me are dealing with it who have the patience and the resolve to figure it out.
Let's pretend that after this talk, you're going to go grab coffee with one of the people in the audience that's in a situation that you were in, whether it be in 2005 when Sean Parker came to you, or in 2007 when you were at Mayfield, and then you joined Facebook. They're in a secure role, but they're looking to do something different. What would your advice be?
Again, what I would say is, the one thing that I've seen in all the investments that I've made, the few companies that I've started, the companies that I've been with, is like, you have a 1% chance of being successful in the best case. And that's why, like, when you look across and you're like, wait, how did that company win and that company fail? They're both exactly the same. Well, it's almost happenstance, right? It's this weird confluence of like luck and timing and a bunch of other things. So if that's the case, and somebody is sitting there in a point where like you're frustrated and you're like, I want to do something big, then actually do that and actually go and try something in an area, like I said, where there is going to be massive value reallocation. And the two most—
Explain to me, what is that?
So in healthcare, in part because of Obamacare, but also in part of, so for example, there's a really big case that was argued in front of the Supreme Court where this company Myriad, based in Utah, was given a patent to the breast cancer gene, which, hopefully, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of you in this audience who know someone with breast cancer. This is genetically identifiable. BRCA1, BRCA2, it's expressed in your person. But the idea that you have to basically go through a gatekeeper to figure that out, to me, is abhorrent. And so we've spent a lot of money to basically help litigate that all the way to the Supreme Court, get it overturned. So whether it's something like that, where if I think it will get overturned, you'll have an explosion in the types of businesses around genetic understanding and decoding, et cetera, which will create a completely new pipeline of ways to think about healthcare. Or whether it's Obamacare. The point is, trillions of dollars up for grabs. Just get in there and figure something out. In education, I think right now people think it's about MOOCs or some other stuff. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we are in this really huge secular transition away from degrees towards skills. It no longer matters where you went to school, what you did. Don't tell me you have an MBA. It's irrelevant. It's useless. Who gives a shit? Learn to code, and you'll be employed for the rest of your life. I lost a kid, 24-year-old kid, to a big company in Cupertino, where he got paid $175 grand a year and $600,000 guaranteed over 4 years in RSUs. And he's not done anything ever. Okay? So all of you should teach your kids how to code. All of you. You should learn how to code. But my point is, it's about skills now. And so that's another reallocation of trillions of dollars. And then in financial services, Chris talked about it earlier, but Bitcoin and things like it is the equivalent of the red pill. Okay? We are entering a completely world of uncharted water right now.
Have you made any investments in Bitcoin?
So, I mean, I personally own Bitcoin in my hedge fund. I own Bitcoin in my fund. I own Bitcoin in my private account. it is a huge deal. It's a huge, huge, huge deal. Because what you're talking about right now is for the next 3 to 5 years, an unbelievably better store value. It is gold 2.0, right? The value of gold that hedges the world economy about $9 trillion, right? $1,300 an ounce, of which only $100 to $150 is the actual production value. So all the rest of it is imputed, where, Lena, you and I have decided that it's worth $1,300 an ounce. Well, guess what? I can do the same thing with Bitcoin, except now I can do it outside the purview of every single government. It's being used everywhere where you would think it would be used. Russia, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Venezuela, Argentina, everywhere where you have currency pressure, everywhere where you want to basically shield your assets. And then after that, it'll probably become a payment mechanism. So in all of these 3 industries, you're talking about trillions of dollars up for grabs. Up for grabs, right? And it's just about trying something.
Right.
And taking a few months to understand what the opportunity is and then hit the scene. And I think that the cool thing is, it's easier to know how to code. It's actually useful in a way where, you can probably hack something together yourself. You can find folks. And so this is the time where people should be trying really big, crazy things.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much, Chamath.